us as soon as she can. Good evening. This is the Walpole Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight is Monday, February 22nd. It is 7:30, or just after 7:30, and the hearing we have for tonight is case number 0320 55 SS LLC. This is Summer Street Comprehensive Permit pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40B. For tonight, and I can tell that we have a lot of participants out there listening in. We are not going to take any comments from the public tonight. The goal of this meeting is to address the list of waivers, which is an important part of the 40B process. And we're going to have input from the fire department and Tetra Tech. Tetra Tech is the peer reviewer for this development. And we have to vote on a revised scope of work from Tetra Tech, and that's going to be an increased cost of $15,000. So that's what we're looking at. So I don't want neighbors and people that are at home thinking they're going to comment on that. You can still comment. You can submit letters. You can submit any kind of evidence that you want. But for tonight, we're going to focus on the issues that we have right before us that I already identified. Okay. So we have with us tonight, we have Town Council, Amy Questle is with us. We also have Ashley Clark, the Community and Economic Development person who's been working on these developments with us since the beginning. And we also have the new Community Development Director, Patrick Deschaines, who is joining us. We also have Amy Messier from the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Administrative Secretary. Jane, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Okay, and let's see, at this point, the first thing, I think it's relatively easy. In fact, I already signed the request for additional funds. It's for Tetra Tech for the revised scope, and it's going to take in another $15,000 for peer review on this. Mr. Hale, we're requesting that you pay for this. Do you have any comments on this? Okay, thank you, Mr. Hale. Could I have this has to be a roll call vote. Could I have a motion to approve the additional request for $15,000 in the peer review from Tetra Tech as outlined in the memo that they've already submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Second by Jane. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. Suzanne Murphy.
Murphy, aye.
Bob Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
And I'm John Lee. Aye. Okay, that was easy. Next, we have some comments from the fire department. Ashley, I know you've been working with the fire department on this. We received the memo either today or yesterday. I'm going to pull it up on another computer. Ashley, can you walk us through some of the issues that have been raised or resolved?
I believe most issues at this point have been resolved to a point where they can be addressed at the condition level. There's an outstanding question about Road B that we're gonna discuss further, and Sean Reardon is here and just unmuted himself, so I have an inclination that he can add more to this than I can.
I'm just getting ready, not yet.
Oh, okay. So if there's any specific questions you have, I spoke with Paul this morning and said that at this point, the outstanding issues are condition level versus plan changes. So the buildings are kind of where the buildings are going to be, and the roads are kind of where the roads are going to be. If that is helpful. Sorry, I'm very trying not to sneeze while I talk, so I apologize.
So I just have some questions. When you said they were resolved, like the letter dated today from the fire department, I think it has 16 or so, 19 different items on it, including things like changing the names of streets and the names of the project, and adding in a second means of entrance or egress from the garage. Is that, when you say it's resolved, does that mean that the applicant and the fire department are amenable, to addressing all of these, or what do you mean by that?
So I think that there will be, there'll be a condition that streets change names. And it's kind of, it's the board's decision and their conditions. Ideally, the applicant and the board come to an agreement on what those conditions are, but ultimately it's the board's decision and the conditions that they find are necessary to promote public safety and health are valid conditions. So,
Mr. Chairman, could I just make a quick response? And that is the last time the deputy fire chief spoke in front of the board, he did mention that a lot of these issues we had responded to long ago, but he just wanted to keep them as placeholders. So in most cases, we have agreement. We agreed to change the names long ago. It's just not appropriate to do it until we have a permit. There's a process, and we're willing to go through that.
Okay, and those, I agree, those are details that can be worked out down the road, things such as name changes and all that. But as far as the requirements of sprinklers for the buildings, that's all things that conditioned, you'd be willing to follow and would follow. Is that right, Mr. Hale?
So we're willing to sprinkle the portion of the project that's rental, and all of those buildings are required by code to be sprinkled. The single family home and the duplexes are not required to be sprinkled, and we don't intend to do that. So
that might become an issue because the long distance and the single common entry, not talking about opening up the emergency entry. As you know, the town of Walpole has in the safety requirements, anything further than 750 feet needs to be sprinkled. And I know when I was on the planning board, that was one of the things that we held to, and that was a safety concern. So, that's one of those things that, in the 40B process, that's something that you'll have to take a look at as we move forward. Town Council, do you have anything to add on where we're at with the fire department's comments and where that's at?
So I do not. I guess my only the only question that I had was, and I think this is very minor, but the name change. So we will condition that the two. So I guess if I may, Mr. Chairman, through you to the applicant, will this be one development, or will it always remain two, meaning two different names?
It'll have two different names.
Okay, so if there was a condition that the names of the developments must be approved by the fire department, you're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, number of things in there. They talk about the height of the buildings and the extreme challenge recognized by the fire department. So that's something that, again, we would look at as far as conditions of approval. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on the letter from the fire department? Because I do agree with Ashley. I think that we're pretty much at a good point with that, and these would all be conditioned based on the letter from the fire department dated as of today. Okay, next we have the Tetra Tech report, and we do have with us Sean Reardon. Good evening, Mr. Reardon. Thanks for coming and joining us.
Good evening, everybody.
So you were looking at some really we would say the final things based on the last set of revised plans. And do you want to walk us through where you're at with the peer review?
Yeah, so I think at this point, I think the way Ashley characterized it is pretty accurate, that everything that's been discussed to date that's of consequence or has the chance to fundamentally change the way the development is approached has been addressed, leaving a series of what I would consider relatively minor differences of approach, some being like the fire department, but all that can be addressed in a condition, and then that condition is checked against on the final plans when they go to submit their building permit. So at this point, what we've done is we've gone through and sort of summarized the status of all the outstanding comments and recommended conditions that sort of ties those up in a nice, neat way to put into the comprehensive permit decision so that we can see to them getting done in the final plans. For example, there's detail that's still required related to the water system and in the sewer system, but at this point, the applicants demonstrated that the system that they have is going to work and not pose any problems for the neighborhood. But there are certain things that need to be detailed and confirmed with the sewer department and water department prior to them getting a building permit. For example, some detailed analysis on water pressures and things like that, all of which are appropriate to do once the plan is finally done.
So something like water pressure, that's, have you seen, we haven't had any definitive measurements as far as water pressure. They've said that they believe there's enough water pressure for this, but is that normal, that we would basically say needs to meet the NFPA standards for water pressure for buildings?
Yeah, but it needs to comply with the terms that they've stipulated in their documentation. So they submitted a letter from a water system engineer who understood and looked at the system and determined that in all likelihood it should meet all the requirements. They just need to demonstrate that in the final product to make sure that if they need a pump station or some other sort of boosting device, that it's incorporated. But right now, there's, in the absence of any clear indication that there's something wrong or some problem in the system, I would expect everything else to work out fine in the end. But they need to submit some final documentation to confirm that.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Reardon while we have him with us?
Do not. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, just in going through some of the items, one of the items that was the agreement to construct a fence along the property boundary, and an indication that is in your view that could be done, you know, in a way that was sensitive to any wetlands and things like that out there. Is that going to necessitate amendments to the orders of conditions as a sort of an amendment to those plans?
Actually, the way we worded the recommended condition was that unless otherwise precluded by the Conservation Commission, that we want that to be a continuous fence line. Understanding that the Conservation Commission has their responsibilities under the Wetlands Protection Act, so we wanted to be on record saying that's important to us, and that we think it can be done responsibly, but in the end game, it's going to be the Conservation Commission's decision, and we've crafted our condition in a way that gives them the opportunity to do as they see fit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other board members with questions? So, I still have one question about the entrance to the property. The original plan showed a dimensions of 120 feet and then another one of 112 feet. And Sean, did you see any of that? Did you pick up on that discrepancy on the plans?
No, I'm not clear on what you're referring to.
So the before construction plans shows the entrance way at 112 feet, and we're talking along Summer Street, right out between the train tracks and the next property, and then there's, when they actually showed the design plans, it turns into 120 feet. I've raised this earlier. I asked this at a previous meeting, and I'm just not sure where this is such a sensitive area, the entrance, where we're, concerned about everything funneling through there.
Yep.
I think that's something that needs to be looked at. So,
Admittedly, I did not check that, and my apologies if I was supposed to. Perhaps it could have been a change that resulted from the change from a boulevard section to a single roadway section. But let me take a look at that, John, and I'll make sure what's on the plan is accurate.
okay, yeah, because it's based on the original plan submitted. I did bring it up. I'm not sure if Katie Enright's here tonight, but it was mentioned at a previous meeting on the dimensions. It seems like it's 8 feet discrepancy between the two sets of plans.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I had one other question if I could.
Yep, go ahead, Bob.
One of the, recommended conditions was regarding the traffic mitigation. That has been, kind of a hot topic amongst the neighborhood, and the proposed condition is to require construction of any improvements that are ultimately made there upon or prior to the 151st occupancy permit received. And I'm just curious how that figure was arrived at. Is it just half the number of the total number of units, or was there some rationale that kind of supported that being the tipping point at which those improvements need to be in place?
Yeah, at the risk of losing my qualifications as an anal retentive engineer, that there was no detailed calculation that led up to that. I think what it was is we were thinking the overall impact of the intersection was about 10% of the volume, and traditionally at about 5% is when significance kicks in terms of additions to intersection volume. So it really kind of in a serendipitous way segued pretty well into a 50% occupancy number.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I just ask you to clarify the question about the dimension in the front? We just you just wanting to know the width of the frontage?
Yeah, that's right. Out by on Summer Street, the width of the frontage shows up on one of the early set of plans that was submitted as 120 feet across, and then the other one, I believe it's 112 feet. So there's just a discrepancy of 8 feet, which in that area, that's a big difference.
Okay, we'll clarify that. The width is wider than both those numbers. I suspect that it was just how the two lots were divided, but we'll get an answer for you.
Well, whatever. It didn't add up on the sets of plans on the earlier submission, and on the revised plan, it didn't show any of those distances. So it's on the first set of plans that we were working off of, but again, that shouldn't have changed as far as the distance of the property when acquired.
Correct.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll concur with that as well. The shape of the lot is still the shape of the lot. At worst, it's a labeling error, if anything.
Okay, let's just make sure that everything adds up right there. Okay. Anybody else with questions on? Actually, I have a question. I've got your memo, Sean Reardon, and the bit about the occupancy permits. So what happens if the redesign of the South Walpole Square never happens? Because that's really out of the control of both Mr. Hale and also the zoning board. If that, that's going to have to be with the selectmen to handle that. What happens if, that redesign never occurs.
Then the intersection is going to have to handle the additional volume from the project. No different than it would have to handle the just normal escalation of traffic over time that's included in the report and expected over the next 5 to 10 years. You know, unfortunately, what it means is that, you know, the performance of that intersection will get worse and worse and worse over time. And eventually, at some point in time, a solution would probably be needed.
Okay, but where it's a condition in the 40B, it's one of the conditions that we would have there. It's not what's going to happen if they reach 150 units and the square is not reconfigured.
I saw Amy
They
raising
would
her
have to come
hand. That's
back.
probably a better question for her.
Yeah, they would have to come back for a modification of the decision.
Okay.
I don't agree with that.
If it's a condition, yeah.
Well, we can't agree to a condition that doesn't, where it's amorphous. So we just have to work on a condition that.
Right, we haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah,
but
we just need to figure it out. I agree with Amy.
I think the board's become very familiar with the modification process due to another. So it would go through that similar process if there was something in the decision that ultimately, so for example, and I think we'll address this in any decision that's written for this project, but for the previous project, the condition was based on the Conservation Commission's conditions, and then it got appealed to DEP, so the ZBA decision needs to reflect those changes. So there's an avenue for that.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Amy. This is Lou Levine. I agree with Amy and David, and I don't want to extend this conversation, but the only thought I would put out there, and I know it's a nebulous discussion about this condition, the project can't be in a situation where they get to the 150 occupancy unit and they then have to modify it to go forward. You know, the modification, with all due deference to the Board of Appeals, no matter how quickly and reasonably they may act, there may be a difference of opinion. So we can't have a condition that's, you know, not fulfillable. Meaning this is a condition that's really way beyond the purview of, as the other member brought up initially, of the developer. He has no control over what the selectmen may choose to do, when they choose it, etc. And I'm only talking in generalities because we don't have anything in front of us. That's all I'm pointing out for you guys to think about when you look at this condition in black and white.
The bottom line is that a condition like that where we might have to come back to the board would not be financeable. Period. End of story.
Mr. Chairman, this isn't for discussion right now. We haven't worked it out.
Yeah,
okay.
We will. It'll get worked out.
Okay, and that's why I just wanted to make sure it will be worked out in town council.
I'll make sure.
It's a workable issue. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, thank you all. Okay, who else has any other board members with comments on, and we're just looking at the Tetra Tech at this point? So, Sean, I know this came out, we just got this today, this morning. On that, I saw that just about everything is listed as resolved, and what you're saying is it's resolved either to the satisfaction or with a condition can solve these concerns. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Good. Okay. Who do we? Anybody? Just want to be inclusive of all board members. Everybody good? Okay. Okay. Amy Questle, at this point, I think what we need to do is move on to the issue of waivers, and we have the waivers. Hopefully, people have had a chance to look at them, print them out, do whatever, and sometimes if, for folks at home, this might get a little bit tedious, but what we do is we go through every waiver that has been requested. And the way we're gonna do this tonight, almost like town meeting, where if somebody has an issue with it, board members are going to say, you know, hold, but if people think that it's a reasonable waiver or it's a waiver required so that this project does not become uneconomic, that's a term of the 40B process, that it would be allowed. So, Amy, do you want to give us any guidance as we go through these? Ashley, I see you've already pulled it up, and we're going to go through these. Go ahead, Amy.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I went through all of these. We got a couple updates last week from the applicant with, I think there was one that had additional waivers, and then there was one, I think, that was just clarifying some waivers late in the week, last week. So we went through them all, or I went through them all, and put them into this kind of form. This will be this will end up being an attachment to your decision, Exhibit A or Exhibit B. I had a few questions for the applicant. In general, I thought that this was, I thought that the waiver list was very comprehensive, more comprehensive than I normally see on the first go around. So I was pleased to see that. And so I really, you know, I don't have any real comments with regard to the comprehensive rules and regulations. So on A, you know, I don't necessarily have any comments that they're asking for a waiver from a specific statement that they're supposed to make, which I think it could be argued that they actually have made that. The next 8, you know, on B, compliance with the open space, the master plan and the open space plan. Again, they've made some comments regarding, you know, the general impact and benefit, I guess, to this project. On C, they had asked for a waiver on this. I didn't understand why they were asking for a waiver from this, because I went back through everything and it looked to me like they had satisfied this, but they clarified it that they haven't actually gone back all 10 years. So to me, it doesn't seem like that's that big of a deal. Again, the next one has to do with procedurally, you know, what's required. And then we come down to the payment, the filing fee. They're asking for a waiver. So I think you went way too far.
Actually, can you go back to the top of the second page?
Yeah. No, E. We're on, yeah. So this, I think, would be up for discussion. So I would maybe ask the board to hold that.
Hold on, I'm not where we are, I guess. All right, I just got past the didn't go back 10 years, and then
Okay.
Mine is not listed EF for whatever.
Mine's not either. I think it's just for the screen.
Okay.
That was added in today. Actually added that in because it's going to make it easier, as opposed to saying section 3.2.19
Okay.
for it. So the section numbers are all the same. It's just letters have been added.
Okay. All right.
So Suzanne, it's 3.2.19 that I think.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. So okay.
Yeah, and then 3.2.5.4.
Okay.
You know, again, that is what the plan requires, what your comprehensive permit rules and regulations require. You know, ledge, outcrops, and trees, and in a property this size, that would be, you know, almost impossible for the applicant. And then in section 5.5, it's a requirement that any professional that, you know, offers any kind of opinion has to be at every single meeting. And then 5.6 is that we could collect money for notary or stenographer, and we don't need to do that. So
let's go back. Take out that hold right there for F. That was not one that we were going to hold. Okay, thank you.
And then we get into the zoning bylaw. This is really what most of the waivers always pertain to. So again, we have, the residential use is prohibited in the limiting manufacturing zone. Obviously, because this is a comprehensive permit, that can be waived. Again, a common one is J, which is, the table, more than one principal building on a lot. And the size, the size that's required per dwelling unit, obviously that it cannot be met. In districts, no building, there's a building circle requirement. This is very common under K. It's very common in zoning bylaws. And then again, these are all waivers that are necessary for the project to be constructed. Again, lot frontage, we only have 2 lots as opposed to, single lots for each single family dwelling. And then this is the side setback. And so the column here where this is the most important part of the waivers, I think, is where they explain what the requirement is and what they're asking for. So the side setback requirement is 40, and they're asking for no less than 10. And the next one is lot frontage, which is normally 200 feet, and they're asking for 86 feet. So I just need Ashley to catch up a little bit. So there we go. And then a number of buildings per lot. Normally it's 1 building, and here obviously that's not going to happen. We only have 2 lots. The maximum building height. So here, the maximum building height is 40, and they're looking for 70. And then 70. Well, I'm thinking 70 plus or minus means very close to 70. If that's not the case, then we need to know that. So
I want to hold that one anyways.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
okay.
Are we supposed to be holding things like a town meeting, John?
Yeah, so as we went through these, I mean, Amy has gone through them saying, basically I don't think she had problems with a lot of these going down. I didn't have problems with them, such things as side yard setback in the limited manufacturing zone. And one of the things, if you look at this development, the existing neighbors do not have buildings within 10 feet of their sidelines. I think for the most part, where they're getting into an issue is they're building their own buildings within 10 feet of each other. So
Right.
It's almost one of those things where if somebody chooses to buy one of these, or they want to live in this, buildings 10 feet apart from each other, which by the way is the minimum based on the fire protection code, that's up to Mr. Hale and the future people that are going to buy these. So that's the, we can discuss them. We can discuss all of those issues, but when we see down to 10 feet where 40 feet is required, for the most part, this is not 10 feet from somebody on Summer Street's property.
Correct. And then going down to R, which is section 6C11.
Whoa.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask a quick question. I'm not placing a hold on some things, but the way that I view the waivers, and I guess if town council could weigh in on this, is that this is the sort of the trade-off between providing the zoning relief in exchange for the affordable housing benefits, and it's nice to know exactly what that trade-off is, how far we're deviating from the zoning that would otherwise be required, as opposed to saying, for example, on the lot area, 10,000 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. Now, I know that can't be complied with here, but is it, instead of just granting a blanket waiver that says, something less than that we get some specificity as whether are we talking about 1,000 square feet per unit, or are we talking about 5,500? You know, I think the magnitude of the waiver in some cases can be important. So I'm not holding them because I think in general the waiver is probably appropriate, but I'd like to know on some of these what the specifics are, but I'm not holding them because I object. You know what I'm saying?
So I think that we should go back to that and hold it because they can easily give us that information.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's math. So they should be able to do that.
I'm definitely holding Q. If it's really Q. Mine doesn't say Q.
The height?
The height.
Yeah, okay. And so then the next one down was a little bit difficult. It's projections, the roof, eave, chimney, no more than 18 inches into the setback. And then they have another, which is uncovered and unenclosed porches, decks, platforms, landings, or stoops, which are part of the egress, shall not encroach more than 48 inches into the setbacks. And so, you know, initially they had said they request a waiver to construct the project as shown on the plan. So my, that's one of my pet peeves, that response, because that means that we have to go through and do all the work. And I don't think that we should have to because they know the plans much better. So I did ask for more information on that, and what we received was that units 40 to 52 and unit 6, the mail pickup and the drop-off building, as well as the maintenance building, fall under this waiver. So those are the units in the buildings that will be that will have the roof, eave, chimney, or cornice, or porches, or things like that that will go into the setback. In those, you know, in those different dimensions, 18 inches and 48 inches, I think it is.
Well, wasn't the clubhouse near a vernal pool? Are we going to be able to know that it's exactly as they say?
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman.
So wherever the buildings are on the plans is where they are. So this actually has to do with any
Stairways and
any intrusions into the setbacks.
Are we going to be able to see that before we approve or disapprove?
We should be able to anyway on the plans right now. Yep.
Okay.
And they clarified where on the plans that's going in.
So
Okay.
Could I make a further clarification? And that is that the reason that we've identified those buildings is those are the buildings that are within the 40-foot setback. So by definition, the roof is projecting into the setback. It's not that it's closer than the 10 feet. Does that make sense?
No.
So if the
If you
buildings
look at
in this,
Will not
Okay,
encroach.
so I've got the plan up, and it's sort of sad, I actually already knew where unit 6 was on this this plan. That's right by the train tracks. So that's
Right.
one of the ones that is going to be within 40 feet. Mr. Hale, is it already within 40 feet of the setback, or?
Yeah, so it's within the 40-foot setback. And so we just felt the obligation to flag this as well. But if you're granting the overall waiver, then you've kind of granted this, the setback waiver, that you've kind of granted this as well. But we just wanted to be precise.
Okay, and the other units, 41 to 52, those are all along one of the abutters' side yard on the opposite side of the train tracks, and those also are close to the they're within 40 feet of the setback. Mr. Hale, are they within 40 feet?
So one thing to keep in mind about the waivers is that they're by lot. So the first set of waivers that we're talking about apply to lot 1, which is the rental lot, but they're almost identical for lot 2.
Right. my question is on, if whoever's, Ashley, can you move the plan so that we can see right there, units 41 to 52? Those are how far from, there's no side scale for the setback. Does somebody know how far those units are from the property line?
So a minimum of 10 feet.
Is that the building dimension or the projections into the rear yard? Or, yeah, rear yard.
That's the distance between the property line and whatever part of the building projects. So there's a minimum of 10 feet to the deck.
Okay. Okay, let's.
Okay, so the next one has to do with parking. So the required parking would be 2 spaces per unit, and the applicant is looking for 1.87 spaces per rental unit. This is on the rental side, again, as Mr. Held said. The next is, again, with parking.
Sorry, I guess I'd like more clarification on that, so if you just want for further discussion, that would be great.
Okay. And I will note that the fire department also noted an issue, a potential issue with the parking where they didn't think that there was enough visitor parking.
Right.
The next is the table of parking space and aisle dimensions. They're requesting a waiver to allow 9 by 19 parking spaces with a 24 aisle versus the 10 by 18.5. They didn't list what the required aisle is, but I actually had trouble with this one for a little bit because they're increasing one dimension, but so they're decreasing one dimension by 1 foot, but the other one is not by 1 foot. Usually you see it, 9 by 19, where it's required, it's 10 by 20 or something. So I think it's all going to work out, but, and I think that Sean probably would have noted that if it didn't.
Yeah, Amy, 9 by 19 is absolutely a traditional size.
Yeah.
Far more than a 10 by 18 and a half is.
Yeah.
And they're about the same square footage.
That's what I was trying to figure out, square footage, thank you.
Yeah.
It should stay on this, though, what is required by the town.
So what's required is 10 by 18.5. Well, I'm not sure about the aisle. I'm not sure, maybe if I think we should hold that and
Amy, what I think that refers to is that when you have a 24-foot aisle, this needs to be a 10 by 18 and a half. So if your aisle were a different dimension, you might a different size space.
Okay.
That's correct, Sean. This is Katie.
Okay. Yeah, I understand that. Okay. The next one was I thought was a little bit confusing. So they have at the ends of parking aisles that are more than 15 spaces in length, you're supposed to have landscaped islands, at either end of the row. I went through the plan. I couldn't actually figure out exactly what they were looking for. And so my comments in red, which is, how many landscaped islands are required and how many will be constructed, is in the overall on lot 1, I was trying to figure that out and I really couldn't figure it out. So what they've done is that they have 13. It would require 13 additional landscaped islands. So I got these blue comments today at 4, and I just hand wrote on mine. I'm still not sure. I'm not sure my question was answered. So I'm trying to find out how many were required, but how many are being constructed or how many are proposed. So here all they're saying is the layout would require 13 additional. but I'm still trying to find out how many would be required and how many are proposed. So I'm not, I would request that we hold this so we could get an answer to that.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to clarify, or do you want to keep moving?
You know, if it's a quick clarification, because we're talking about this is for the rental units. Go ahead.
Yes, so in your bylaw, there speaks to interior landscape islands on any parking aisle that has more than 15 spaces needs to have an interior landscape island every 13 spaces. And so we're not providing interior landscape islands, we're only providing exterior and landscape islands. So 13 would be required, and we are not providing 13 for interior landscape islands in the parking bays. So we're not breaking those up.
So 13 are required, and essentially you're providing 0, right?
For interior landscape islands. We're providing all the exterior landscape islands at either end.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Under the next one, section 12.3.A.2.D, which is a residential development of single-family dwellings are permitted by right if no more than 15% or 2,500 square feet, whichever is greater, is rendered impervious. Their impervious is 25%. And then
I'd like to hold this,
okay.
if I may, Mr. Chair.
Thanks.
And actually, all of them in section that refer to section 12, I'd like to hold for discussion.
Yeah. Yep.
Going down to section 13 is for site plan review. They're asking for a waiver from that section. And then under signs, so 7.5.4.c, they're requesting a waiver to allow for 2 freestanding double-faced signs rather than the one that's allowed. I was just wondering if there were any size limitations on the signs that they would need a waiver from, and they have clarified that they do not.
Where are the locations and what are the sizes?
The sizes are going to be less. Both signs will be less than 100 square feet. The locations they have not. I don't think they're designated on the plan.
All right, that's a hold for me then.
That one anyways. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, we do show the sign locations along the frontage of the property in the new site plan.
In every site plan.
Where is it? Where are they?
They're both located out by the street, along the frontage.
On Summer Street?
Yep. They might not be located on this plan set. You can see the signs. You can actually see the 2 rectangles on either side of the site driveway, and they're labeled on the layout and materials plans. Yep.
Katie, why do you need?
Oh, I see those. I don't see them labeled.
Yeah, then you would never know.
This is just the one sheet that we used for the meeting. It's not it's in the 93-page plan.
Oh, okay. Okay. I only looked at the one plan, sorry.
And do you want
I need the height. I need to know about site distance. I need information here. I didn't know what those little black lines were. We can just hold it and do it later.
We're gonna hold that one anyways. So.
Gotcha.
Moving.
So moving on to wetland bylaw and regulations, they're looking for a waiver from section 561 division 2, which requires a local permit be issued by the Conservation Commission. This is a common waiver because the ZBA steps in the shoes of the Conservation Commission. And then going into stormwater, they're again local permit. They're requesting a waiver from that. The no alteration zone. So the commission requires a 25-foot undisturbed vegetative buffer. They are keeping that 25-foot buffer area, except for the crossings and the replication areas, as shown on the plans, and the one-way section of driveway D. And that's been since the beginning. They've held to that, to hold the 25-foot.
So on this, I'd like to hold this one because I believe we have Landis Hershey from Concom with us tonight. So I just want to make sure that that she's okay with these things.
With the replication requirements, they're requesting a waiver to allow the applicant to provide reporting, which is per mutual agreement with the Conservation Commission. That's a waiver that, it can be granted. It can't necessarily be granted in that form. It would have to be, granted that, in compliance with, instead of, a mutual agreement, because we need to know what that mutual agreement is.
I would agree, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hold that one for that reason.
And then for plans and supporting documents, they're looking for a waiver from that in its entirety, meaning they want to go with the plans that they have. They don't want to have to submit additional plans because they are getting an order of conditions from the Conservation Commission under the Wetland Protection Act. The Water and Sewer Department. So here, these are fee waivers, and they had not calculated the total amount, so I did the calculation in red, and they've confirmed my calculations. So those are the amounts that they're looking for to have waived. I'm assuming that you guys are going to want to. You're probably going to want to discuss these.
Yep.
Yeah.
We got to hold those because Sewer and Water wrote to us and specifically said they were opposed to any waivers like that.
Okay.
So, so those two from the Water and Sewer Department, we'll hold those.
And then the building department, they had a waiver requested to eliminate building permit fees for 61 affordable units, but I wasn't sure how to figure that out with the calculation of 18 per 1,000 of estimated costs. So they, I just left it blank. They filled it in. And so that's the amount that they're looking for
Okay.
under building.
And let's hold that one also. I think that's.
Yep. And then they're looking for this global waiver, which I would recommend not approving. And then they added to it, which I would definitely recommend not approving. And then moving on to the ownership. So to lot 2, we have almost identical. We have identical down to, so all of the, I guess it would be down to section 3.2.19, which is the fees.
I'd like to hold that one also.
Okay, and then,
Which one, John? 19?
3.219.
Okay.
and then the others are, the same, waivers as before. Going into the zoning bylaw, we have, all of the same, waivers: residential use prohibited in a limiting manufacturing zone. Again, the circle, the building circle, the frontage, it requires, they have, because there's only 2 lots rather than lots for everything. The side lot line, again, it's 40, they're looking for no less than 10. Lot frontage in the limiting manufacturing is 200. They're looking to create a lot with no less than 133 feet of frontage. The minimum side yard setback for limiting manufacturing, that again is 40. They're asking for no less than 10. The front yard is the same. They're in the limiting manufacturing zone, it's 50 feet. They're looking for the waiver to allow a setback of no less than 36 feet.
Okay, let's hold the,
The frontage?
6B1, side yard setback.
The side yard and the front yard?
Yeah.
Okay, both.
Are we gonna get more specific on those, or is it a blanket?
Well, we're gonna look and see exactly where these are
Okay,
that they're requesting the waivers for.
yeah, it's just it's a whole, the whole shebang, so we need house 40, like the other one, 41 through 52 or something. Okay,
The number of buildings per lot, it's, the bylaw says one, they're going over that. Again, section 6C11 is when we're getting into, the projectiles in, things that project into the setback. They're giving us units that are actually in the setback, so therefore they are projecting into the setback. Again, with the parking, we have the same waivers, for the 9 by 19 to allow.
Sorry,
9 by 19.
I wasn't quick enough. Let's hold
Sorry. The one before.
6C11.
Again, we get into section 12 with regard to the impervious.
Yeah, I'd like to hold those, please.
Yep. Okay. So that's the next two also. Site plan review, again, they're requesting a waiver. And then with here, they have, sign shall be a minimum of 8 feet from the ground level. They're requesting for a sign to be less than 8 feet from the ground. And I was just looking for the height. They're looking for the top of the sign to be 7.6. The top of the rental is approximately 8. So it looks like only one sign. Maybe it would be.
But for clarification, is the requirement 8 feet from the bottom of the sign or to the top of the sign? Minimum of 8 feet from the ground level.
They're having it from the top, so they meet the requirement on one. They don't meet it on the other. I would assume it's the top, but we can clarify that with them.
Well, the bylaw to me, didn't make that much sense.
Yeah.
That there would be a minimum height from the ground. So I didn't know how to interpret it. So I know what we designed, which was the monument sign at 7.6 and the rental sign at approximately 8 feet in height, which seems in scale for the neighborhood, instead of a minimum of 8 feet.
So when I went through it, I thought that it was maybe because of the monument sign that they were trying to define a monument sign by it has to have a minimum height. But unfortunately, it is a little confusing the way that it's written. And then we go on to the wetland bylaw and regulations. Again, they're looking for a waiver for not having to have Concom grant the local permit. Stormwater, they're looking for a waiver for not having to have Concom issue a local stormwater permit. Again, the no alteration zone is for only the crossings and the replication area and that one-way section of driveway D. And then the replication requirements, this was a hold on the last one. Again, I wrote, what does the reporting entail? Oh, we're not there yet.
Yeah, so all the ones for Concom I'd like to hold. Again, I just want to, if Landis is with us, I want to have her input with that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we go down to the water fees again. And so these are the fees that they're looking for to be waived, which I assume we'll hold since we held them on the last ones. And then again, we're down to the global waiver, which I would recommend denial.
Okay, good. Amy Questle, thank you for walking us through that. And now I think the way to go is to actually go back to the beginning, unless, Amy, do you have any other guidance for how best to do this?
No, I think that's probably the best way.
Okay, so let's go back to lot 1. This is the rental waivers and special permits, rentals, okay? And as we go through these, I had already, I'm sure other board members did, they went through these, and I think if we just leave it blank, I think we can say that these are not areas that we're concerned about, and in my notes I had it as approval. What's the better term? Is there a better term, Amy Questle?
I think that right now, you know, we do have to approve these waivers.
Right.
At some point, when we do the final decision, we can go through that. But I think that these are waivers that they are necessary for the project to go forward.
Maybe. My question has to do with what do we call these? Are they? And Ashley, you and I talked about this today. Are these a lot? What's the? No fun.
The terminology.
Ashley had it as needed for comprehensive permit and FCP, but I mean,
this will be subject to our review of the final drafting and all of that, so it may not be exactly as drafted here, but the general consensus of the board is sort of what we're looking for as to each waiver right now.
Yeah. When it goes in the decision, it won't have an approved or not. It'll just be in the decision as a waiver that was granted. So this is for us to track as we go.
Okay, and I don't think we have to write in NFCP on every one. If it's blank, that means that we don't have an issue with it at this point. So as we go down the list, I think the first one we came to that was an issue had to do with the filing fees, and I guess I'm always looking to make sure that whatever we do not make this project uneconomic for the developer. And I just don't see how on a project this scale, this amount of money would make it uneconomic. Am I on the right track? And I see we have Judy Barrett with us this evening. Thanks for joining us, Judy. Is there, how do we want to classify this? Is this a waiver that if the board decides we're not going to grant, then they'll have to pay the filing fees? Is that right?
Yeah, if the board doesn't approve the waiver, then the applicant has to comply. So I guess the question is, what's the rationale for the waiver? And, is the board persuaded by that?
So, Mr. Chairman, very, very simply, the rationale was, if this were a subdivision, the fee would be $23,508. So if it was not an affordable housing, it would be less. So fair housing law seems.
So, Shirley, I spoke with town council at the very beginning of this because this was brought up, and in speaking with her, she made it very clear that a very different thing than a subdivision application. This is an application for a comprehensive permit. So no application. This is the board reviewing all of the things. So when I spoke with Amy Questle, that was kind of the response.
Okay, thank you, Ashley, for your input. And Mr. Hale, do you want to just complete your thoughts there? I know you got cut off a little bit.
So that was the rationale, and it is what it is, and I think you should go on.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know, are we going to discuss each one as we go down? Is that the plan?
Yeah, I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
No, I would agree with your sentiments, Mr. Chairman. I would not be inclined to grant this waiver.
Agreed.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, let's go to the next one that we had on. I should say Drew Delaney, or do you have anything to say on this?
No, not at this time. I agree.
Okay, moving down the list. The next one that we had, that we held.
Jay.
And that had to do with a waiver to allow less than 10,000 square foot lots. So what are we doing? We're taking the approximately all the size of the lot, the two lots combined, and dividing it, or actually size of lot one and dividing it by the number of units that are on it. Is that, so you can get back to us on that one.
Maybe as we go through the other ones, Katie can do that calculation and update us.
Sure, we'll take care of that.
Okay, minimum of the maximum height of the buildings. It's 40 feet is the maximum, and we're going up to 70 feet. The fire department said in their letter as of today that they had concerns about this. I think this is a waiver that I'm not inclined to grant based on the safety of this project. Other board members, your thoughts?
I totally agree on that.
I agree too, 100%.
The fire department didn't like it.
Okay. Bob, your thoughts?
I agree that the fire department clearly had a concern with this. So at a minimum, I think whether we choose to deny it tonight or evaluate it further, I think it's one that's,
These would end up being the tallest buildings in the town.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman, that's not true. There's a six-story apartment building that was just built in the downtown area.
In the downtown area, not on a cow pasture. You are correct.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Phil Mackey, counsel.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Mackey. Good evening.
Yes, I would suggest that we review this a little bit further. Basically, because if you look at the limited manufacturing zone height, it is 40 feet with note 10. And then note 10 basically goes on to explain that you get an additional foot for every foot you exceed the minimum setback. And that is counted off of the closest of the front rear side. Since, or in the process of revising the plans numerous times, we've lost two buildings. They have shifted a bit. And I believe, I'm not an engineer, so Katie would have to speak to this, but certainly you would probably want confirmation that all or both buildings that the waiver is requested for are further than 30 feet away from the minimum setback and therefore comply. So it may not be a point of you needing to deny or confirm. It may not be relevant to the project. And that's something we could certainly confirm with the building commissioner one way or another.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Coffey.
Listen, my concern about this is not only is it in a residential area, it's one thing if you're downtown, but if you're in an area, particularly an area like South Walpole, and it's tight sneakers at best getting in and out of there, and it seems to me
that the developer is trying to squeeze in as many people as he possibly can, and I understand that because it's his income, obviously. But it concerns me that there's very little consideration to what the safety may be with the density. I mean, this is always been my big thing with any of these studies. I would not want somebody in my family living that far in, up that high, and have some kind of an emergency. I just think it's a recipe for disaster. I have a very hard time with this. I think it's just too much. And I think it would lessen the impact of the density if that top floor were not there. That's just my.
Okay, and, so we're gonna hold that. Applicant is gonna provide some additional measurements. And, Mr. Mackey, I understood what you were saying as far as this being a LM zone, but of course, we have a waiver that we're allowing residential in an LM zone. So that's where it gets difficult on this. It's almost like we're playing two different sides of the two different bylaws here. So
I completely agree, which is why I suggested we talk with the building department as well.
Okay, I think
he's the enforcement officer of this whole thing.
But it's going to be the people that are going to be living there that are going to have to deal with it, as Jane Coffey just said. Okay.
So,
completely understand.
Mr. Chairman, I'd ask the board to keep in mind that these are fully sprinkled buildings, and there are advantages in. Forget the economics because they're more expensive to build, but there are advantages in going from 4 buildings with 4 elevators to 2 buildings with 4 elevators. So particularly in a time of COVID, if you are have a restricted number of people in an elevator, the fact that they're 2 next to each other, they'll work more efficiently. The town has mutual aid with nearby towns, and these buildings are, designed to code and are safe.
I would disagree with that. Are these wood-framed buildings? They're not steel and concrete, correct?
There'll be a combination.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
they will be built to code.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, in the area of consideration of the elevators, should there be an electrical problem, there I am, 6 floors up. I have to go down all those stairs, get in my car, and hopefully get out of this death trap. I'm still concerned. Too high, too many, too.
Okay, so either way, we're holding that, and the applicant's going to provide additional information on that. Okay, moving on. Letter R on our list here. So I'll just say on this one, I guess the question is, these are already tied up onto the property owner on Summer Street. I'm not, and now we're saying that the decks are going to be even closer. Is
No, we're not saying that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So what are we? Please clarify. Okay.
So the section says that the projections can't go more than 18 inches into the setback, but the whole building is into the setback. So it's if we're saying that the front yard setback is 50 feet and we're going to be at 36 feet, we're not projecting any further into it than 36 feet. The same with the side. It's just that, technically we're projecting more than 18 inches into the setback because the whole building is within the 40-foot side yard setback, for instance.
I guess what I'm looking at is when I look at the plans, like I said, unit number 6, that's going in right next to the train tracks. That's up to, whoever's living there. But I'm more concerned about the units that are backing up onto the side yard of the resident on Summer Street, where, you know, they're, as you said, Mr. Hale, they're already in the setback, and now the porches are going to be even closer. So that person's yard is going to have decks right out into their yard. And I guess the question is it necessary to have decks right out into somebody's side yard? And these are the units. Thank you for pulling it up. I guess, Ashley, if you pulled it up, this is what I'm talking about. They're already close, and now what we're saying is that we would grant a waiver to make them decks even closer within.
No, we're not asking that. We're the deck. We're asking for a 10-foot setback, including the deck. That particular waiver, we're just asking for because it's a technical requirement, and it's a silly requirement, given the fact that we're already asking for a waiver to be there anyway. But we're not asking as a result of that waiver to get even closer.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, and I'm looking at the abutter, the Mullers, and it's one thing that, you know, if the building has to be within the setback close to their property, but now there's a deck that's that close to their property line, basically overlooking into their property. And my question is, why is that necessary to have the decks? I understand it's necessary to have the building there, but is it necessary to give a waiver for the deck? You know, do other people understand what I'm saying on this?
I do.
So I would ask the board to keep in mind that unit 41 through 52, along that line, the grade of our properties is, you know, 6 to 8 feet lower than the adjacent property. And, you know, we've met and discussed our plan with the neighbor who has not objected and has told us they wouldn't object. Their land is deed restricted, so they can't build, you know, it's basically forested, and they're not going to see these units for the most part. You know, they have, it's tremendously thick vegetation. They have a garage that blocks their view. We've offered to provide additional landscape screening, and you know, this basic design has not changed since our initial application. So the people who will live here will enjoy having a deck.
Okay, and
what about the house behind 51? People live there. They're going to be able to see them growing.
Which
Under
so that is the Muller's house, and the house, you know, so that unit backs up to their garage. Mm-hmm. So from the back of their house, they would have to look through their garage, which is, you know, not something they can look through to see unit 51. And again, the grade is lower, and it's heavily wooded.
Okay, and Mr. Hale, thank you for the explanation of that. Possibly one of the conditions would be a vegetated buffer along that property line, just to protect both future residents and existing residents. So, okay, I understand what you're saying as far as the grade and all. Okay, can we go to the next one? Unless anybody else has something on this. Who has to hold this on the visitor?
I believe that was me, Mr. Chairman. I just was trying to get clarification about the allocation of spaces to units versus to visitors. And I didn't know if this 1.87 figure, how that breaks out. In other words, the way I interpret the requirement is that for every dwelling unit, they are permitted 2 per unit, typically under the zoning. And those would be available to the residents in that unit. And I don't think what we're saying, but maybe we need clarification. I don't think what we're saying is that on average 1.87 spaces are available for each rental unit. I think what we're saying is a certain number will be available, sort of designated for that rental unit, and the balance would be a visitor space that would not be assigned to a unit. So I think in that sense, the waiver is, if that's right, the way I'm conceiving of it, then I think the waiver is actually could be something less than 1.87, if that makes sense. In other words, if we're taking the total number of units and dividing by the total number of spaces, we're including in the denominator visitor parking that's not really assigned to any particular unit. And so I don't know if the plan for the project is to, in conjunction with renting a unit, you get 1 dedicated parking space, or how that's working out.
So can I address that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so the townhomes all have 2 spaces, 1 interior, 1 in the driveway. Then we've added 43 visitor parking spaces. The multifamily side, the surface spaces are first come, first serve, and the spaces in the garage under will be reserved. But the zoning code, it doesn't, just gives a ratio requirement, and it doesn't differentiate between visitor spaces and other spaces. And this ratio is a very healthy ratio. Mass Housing wanted us to provide less parking. So we're very comfortable that this is a healthy sort of industry standard or better parking ratio for this rental project.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that too as well. 1.87 is relatively high.
Okay, Mr. Reardon, does that take into consideration that there is no public transportation within walking distance of this, of this development? You still feel, I understand if this was a development in the city, this might be high, but for something like this, do you still feel that way?
I do generally. I've seen ones in the order of 1.65. If we're at 2, and the 2 would generally refer to a gross number. So to Bob's question, the 2 would refer to project-wide, so it wouldn't include like a separate breakout for handicap space or anything like that. So, David, just to confirm, this 1.87 is the total number of units, total number of parking spaces divided by the total number of units, correct? The 1.87?
Correct. And, one of the things you have to remember is that there's of 244 units, 114 of them are 1-bed units, which, have a less of a parking demand than you might normally see. And that's one of the reasons that this is, rental projects like this need less parking than 2 spaces per unit.
How many units are 3-bedroom in this project?
So on this side, the rental side, there are 26.
And how many on the ownership side?
I can't remember off the top of my head. So I believe that of 56 units, I think there are 19 2-beds, and the rest are 3 beds.
So ballpark 30?
Yes.
And you consider 1.8 is fine and dandy for 3-bedroom apartments?
That's not, if I may just clarify, Mr. Chair, that's not for both sides. This is just the requirement for the townhomes and the rental project. The actual ratio on the for sale project is much higher than it's required to be. This is just the rental side of the project.
That's understood. That we've got 2 sets of waivers, and right now we're just looking at the rental side.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. But even still, what we're talking about is 26 3-bedrooms on the rental side.
Yep, 26. Thank you.
Yep.
And the fire chief did have issues with this, if I recall. And who is going to monitor when the humans have visitors and there's no parking?
Well, generally speaking, that doesn't really happen. I mean, the reason that there's industry standards is because they work. And there's plenty of parking on the rental side.
But this is private, so the cops aren't going to be going in there to hand out tickets like in real life.
And it will be professionally managed, and there's more than adequate parking here.
Yeah, just one clarifying question then. A person who is renting in the space is free to park in the visitor parking spaces?
Technically, yes.
I think if I'm not mischaracterizing Ms. Murphy's concern, it's that if you don't assign like dedicated parking to those renting and then dedicated visitor spaces, what you'll have is people who are renting but have more than one car are going to park wherever they can, including in the visitor spaces, and effectively,
so
you don't have very many visitor spaces left.
Remember that all of the townhouse units have 2 spaces, all of them, and there's an additional 43 visitor spaces. It's a very generous. So if you drove around Walpole at townhome communities, on the townhome side of it, you'd find that our parking was very generous in comparison. In fact, on the townhome side, if you were granting waivers per housing type, on the townhouse side, we exceed the requirement. The requirement is 2, and around the townhomes, we have more than 2. In the multifamily, where we have only 1 and 2 bedrooms, and more than half of the multifamily, almost 60%, I think 59% of the units are 1 bedrooms. We have less parking. So we've designed this so that it will actually work. We've consulted our property management company, and they've endorsed this design in terms of being able to service the clients that we want to attract.
Okay, so on this, although I might not be wild about it, I also look at the fact that this is Mr. Hale's project, and if he designs something that's terrible, nobody's going to want to live there. And he obviously has an interest in making sure that he has adequate parking. So, 2 is required. 1.87 is what they have. We've discussed this a lot. We've spent a lot of time talking about parking, and we even heard from our peer reviewer that he felt that this is adequate. And I'll also add, for people listening at home, Mr. Hale also said that Mass Housing was recommending less. And
in fact, they requested 1.65.
Okay. So,
Sean, can I ask you a question? Do most people allocate, a spot for an apartment?
No.
It's random, come get them.
Here's why, because what you end up having is a lot of unused parking spaces in an environment where you want to eliminate how much pavement you have in consideration of the wetland impacts and things like that. It is a pretty good balance to strike there. But to David's point, the 1.65 is kind of what we see as the pushback number from most regulators, where they don't want to see too much parking, because that has the added benefit of reducing traffic. So the less traffic, less parking you have, the less vehicles you have, less traffic you have. So there's kind of a push and pull on both ends.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, there was a statement that there was going to be reserved parking underneath. Who would that reserved parking be for?
Would be for people that live there.
Which units? How will you determine?
So it would be for people that live in buildings 1 and 2.
So every person that lives in buildings 1 and 2 will park underneath?
No, some people will reserve spaces underneath and some people will not.
And so how will you determine which units will get reserved spaces and which won't? Because you can't just have all the market rate units have reserved spots and not have the affordable units not have reserved spots. So we have to know what your formula is going to be.
No, there's no formula. It's basically consumer demand.
Is that part of fair housing, Amy?
Right. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is are you going to have, out of your, say there's 100 units in a building, are you going to have, 60 of those units are going to get a reserved parking space? How many of those 60 are going to be affordable? Right.
Only people that pay for it will get it.
Oh, that you can't do that.
So,
Can't do that.
Can't do that.
Wait,
You can't do that unless you reduce their rent accordingly.
Exactly.
well, so I've been through this with mass housing, and what I've just explained to you, we did with mass housing before, and is the industry standard. So it's really a mass housing issue.
No, it's not actually. It's not. It's a local issue where you have affordable housing. You have to treat affordable housing the same as market rate housing.
That's right. And no market rate housing automatically gets it.
But they're paying. You're going to have them pay.
Just like if they have a pet cat.
Discrimination, isn't it?
No.
Because if you're unable to pay,
right?
If you qualify for an affordable unit, then that means that you're at a certain level of the AMI, and so if you price those people out of that parking space, the result is that you're creating a situation where you're discriminating over them to get those spaces.
No,
right.
I mean, we don't have to belabor this now, but I am certain that it's a market-driven thing, and you're not required to provide covered parking to anybody, market or affordable.
Okay, I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Hale. Judy Barrett, you're our 40B expert. Where do you take this?
No, I'm with Amy on this. I mean, I think that, the developer's basically asking the Board of Appeals to grant a permit that creates issues under the Fair Housing Act. And I don't think that's a position that you want to be in. I think that if the developer's going to charge for parking, access to spaces, excuse me, I'm speaking, then you need to think about, well, what's the rent going to be for someone in an affordable unit so that they're not spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And it may be that someone who has the ability to, or if it's a lottery system or something for inside parking spaces for some percentage of the affordable units, then their rent is going to have to be adjusted so that they're not paying more than 30% of their income for an apartment.
So I would ask, Mr. Chairman, that some research be done here, because this is just not how the law operates in Massachusetts. I've done this 5 times, and there's never been any restriction. And I think if you know, we consult Mass Housing, they will say that there is no such restriction.
Well, this isn't a mass housing issue. This is a permit being granted by a local board that has to keep its eyes on the Federal Fair Housing Act. So if mass housing's okay with it, that's great. But I certainly wouldn't recommend to the town of Walpole that they take an action like this. You're basically saying it's like a four door.
I'm not asking for a waiver. There's no regulation in the town of Walpole that requires a property owner to provide covered parking to a resident. I'm not asking for a waiver.
There is
And I don't think you can make one up, make a regulation up.
there's a requirement to provide parking though.
They can impose a condition.
Okay, so Judy Barrett, I think you're exactly right. And can you find a condition that's been used on other developments that address this issue?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and that's fair. We can put that in as a condition that doesn't get us in trouble with any federal fair housing. And I also agree with Mr. Hale that he's not asking for a waiver on this, but he is asking for a waiver on parking. So that's how we can address that. So, okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I just make a suggestion on this condition? Can it be in the term of if and to the extent it's required under any other applicable state and federal law? And so if it's not, Mr. Hale's premise, which is mine also, that it's not required, that's not required. But if it is required, fine, then we will have to deal with the, underground parking. So, we're debating something that's really out of your jurisdiction. That's all I'm saying, potentially.
Yep.
Right?
Well, so I agreed a bit about the underground parking. So what I just asked Judy Barrett to do is find something that is fair and equitable, and that would be a possible condition that we would put in.
Yeah, but two things I'm asking for is to the extent there's any condition proposed is to the extent that it's required by state or federal law. And secondly, that Judy show us a condition out of another 40B where they impose this.
Mr. Chairman, is there a state law requiring that the management company has to do plowing? Is there, this is, not every condition is based on a state or federal law. There is equity involved here. And again, they're seeking a comprehensive permit from this board. I hardly think that any condition requiring that the underground parking be distributed equitably would be make this uneconomic. They can't allege that. So this isn't the end. This isn't the end of the world. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm speaking. I am speaking.
Don't cut anybody off. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is not the end of the world. We're looking for this just to be equitable. There's numerous conditions in a comprehensive permit that are based on equity. They're not based on federal or state law.
Exactly.
Amy, Mr. Chairman, if the condition is that people in the affordable units will have an equal opportunity to get an underground covered parking space, I don't think there's any objection. I disagree that would have anything to do with the rents established for their units. And so if they have additional monies that they can afford for an underground parking space or to buy a better car or whatever. I think if you speak to Mass Housing, their rents are based on the apartment values and not with underground parking spaces or without them. Okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, I disagree. One of my clients is the Brookline ZBA, and this is routinely addressed in Brookline because so often most or all of the parking for those projects is underground. And so either the affordable units are given a parking space or their rent is adjusted.
Okay, and I think we've discussed this quite a bit. We still have other conditions and a whole other set to go through. So let's not get bogged down on this. Judy Barrett, thank you. You said you'll find an example of a condition that is fair and equitable for everybody. Okay. Moving along. Ashley, do you have something? Ashley Clark? Okay. Okay, moving along then.
I think we wanted to stop with the landscaping island thing. If it's helpful, I could site plan that shows the rows of cars that I think they're referring to.
That'd be good.
So what I think is happening is you see these rows of cars. Under the bylaw, an island would be required throughout this. A landscaping island. So I think that's what that's referring to. And this is something that, yeah. So, should I switch back over to the waivers?
Yeah, I mean, these are large parking fields, and that's you know, that's what the applicant wants to have at this development, and you know, I feel that we're bound because of the laws of 40B. We're really bound on this one. I mean, how is this you know?
I think it should be added to Chairman Lee that the last waiver, it was said by the applicant of how they're above and beyond the normal standard, which is 1.65. But when you delete particular parking spaces that should be deleted as islands, that's where you can come up with that larger 1.87 number.
Good point, Drew.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
If this is what they would like their residents to deal with,
So does anybody have anything else on the interior parking islands? I think we all see, you know, the bylaw is intended to break it up, make it so that it's a more livable place, and
with plantings usually.
Yeah, usually plantings and shade.
Make it look nice.
Shade trees, and that's what's being proposed, and you know.
They want concrete jungle.
I can bring up a landscaping plan if that's helpful for context.
It's really not. It's because what we're talking about is, you know, probably about 45 parking spaces all in a row, and you know, a lot of thought goes into, you know, designing communities with islands every 13 or whatever it is in green space. So, and I know we did make some progress on green space on this, but you know, when I'm looking at these large parking fields, and I know with even shopping plazas, they wouldn't allow it because you want to have it broken up. But this is what the applicant's proposing. Okay, Ashley, can you go back to the waivers?
Was there any more? Sorry, I kind of sorry. Did the board want to discuss that any further, or should I remove the hold on it?
I mean, if they want ugly, they want ugly.
Well,
I mean, it's not completely beyond our authority to require some sort of islanding, maybe not to the extent that the bylaw is, but if we feel strongly about it, to break up the parking field, it will raise questions about whether providing a certain number of islands renders the project uneconomic, but, you know, that's
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
That's the balancing act.
So this is a very typical design for multifamily housing. It's absolutely industry standard. There's very little vacancy in rental housing, particularly in the suburbs, and people will love living here.
I believe we have testimony from your reviewer that would suggest otherwise, but.
So, you know, yeah, Bob, let's just, we can hold this, because I think we still have questions on it. I actually like the idea, instead of, you know, having an island every 15 spaces, you know, should we say that every 20 spaces or whatever the number is? And the question, as you raised, Bob, is that going to make this uneconomic for the developer? You know.
Can I ask too that maybe Landis add input as far as the impervious space, and if that increased amount of, you know, reduction in pavement might assist at all?
Yeah. I think we're going to bring in Randy shortly. He's still here. So we can ask at that point, but let's just hold this. Go to the next one.
So this was my request to hold on the section 12 items. You know, as we all know, we've had a lot of helpful input from the residents in the community, and one of the issues that had come up fairly regularly was impacts to the aquifer and sort of the relationship between the impervious and those types of impacts. And I believe one or more residents raised the question as to whether or not, as a matter of state law, we could waive these. And so I guess I'll explain, but I think we might need some direction from our town council on this. But under the regulations under the Massachusetts drinking water regulations, there is a provision that I saw that says that no person shall violate or cause to be violated any municipal zoning or non-zoning control that is required as part of the department issued approval of a groundwater source for public water supply approval pursuant to blah, blah, blah. And the representations anyway that were made by the community were that the watershed or the water protection overlay district and the various zones which line up with the same state regulations were approved by the department as part of that, had to be reviewed and approved by them. So I think there's a question as to whether we can grant this waiver without also, we're sort of caught between two different state laws. We have this one requirement that we can't allow a violation of an existing zoning, and then we have the 40B requirement that gives us authority to waive zoning. But if we grant the waiver, then we might be at cross purposes with the state regulation. So I'm concerned about that, and I don't want to obviously get the board or the town, you know, in violation of these state regulations, and as someone who is allowing a violation to occur.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Bob, are you finished?
Well, you can go ahead, Mr. Hill.
So, what you and Phil Mackey can chime in here. What your section 12 says is that if you have equal or less than the allowed impervious in a zone, so in this case, between buildings and pavement, 70% impervious is allowed, and you meet the state stormwater guidelines, you deserve a special permit. So this isn't in a zone 3, or, you know, there's no special state regulations for this land. This is simply a local zoning code, and we happen to meet the requirements for a special permit to be issued. That
may be true. I'm just, in the context of what we're doing here, is granting a waiver from those requirements. I'm just saying, I'm not sure that we can do that, and to take that to the next step, if you do need a special permit, then you would have to, and this is an open question, I don't know the answer to this, but it's conceivable that you may have to apply for that special permit. We can't grant it unless you have asked, submitted all of the information, including, under the bylaw certification that from a professional that the increase in impervious surface won't have any impact on the underlying water resource. And so, anyway, I'm just raising this question because as I said, an abundance of caution for the board and for the town that I don't want to grant a waiver that we are legally prohibited from granting. And it's just an issue that needs a little more attention.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm pretty sure you're done, Bob. I'm not trying to cut you off. Part of this actually is probably a question for Amy, because we've wrestled with it on our end. I actually do agree, Bob, we probably owe you a letter. I'm not sure if Katie has submitted that or not. But we believe that we comply with all of the requirements for the special permit under Section 12. But as this is a comprehensive permit, kind of to your allusion earlier, Mr. Chairman, of which part of the zoning bylaw really applies, or not really applies, but how is it applied to this particular project? We didn't know if we were supposed to ask for a waiver of the special permit, a waiver of the requirement for a special permit, or actually the special permit, because we're at the board who would be granting this. So I don't think it's a matter, I don't think there's any resistance to providing anything the board needs as far as a comfort level that in fact the watershed is being protected. But how do you want us to proceed? And so to some extent, I'm asking the board, or Amy through the board, what's the best way to go about this? Because we actually believe in a regular permit, which would never be here because you wouldn't have residential in LM, but nonetheless, were this a 48 situation, you would have had, amongst the varieties of requests for relief, a special permit under Section 12. That's not how you file comprehensive permits, so just tell us how we get there from here, and we're happy to do it.
Well, I'm going to let Amy answer that, but one of the possibilities is you can't get there from here. So, Amy, go ahead.
So I would suggest not granting a special permit because they did apply for a comprehensive permit. So it's more along the lines of a waiver from that regulation. However, that being said, you can waive the special permit requirement because they meet the requirements of a special permit. It happens all the time in comprehensive permits, and so I think that the information that's been offered that they're going to produce would be helpful. If they could produce that information, that they would be in any other permit, they would be able to meet the requirements of a special permit. I think that would give this board a little bit of confidence in granting or denying this waiver. But I think it's going to be a waiver, not a special permit.
Okay, well that sounds reasonable. So, Mr. Mackey, if you can work on that, figuring out the best way to show that you would be able to get a waiver. And just as one correction, Mr. Hale, you said something about Zone 3. This area is actually in the primary recharge area for the town of Walpole Wells. So we don't have a Zone 3, but we have an Area 3, which is the primary recharge area, and that's what area this is in. Paul, do you want to go to the next one, or do you think that's all of these 12s sort of covered? That we're going to need more.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I wanted to discuss it further on all of it, because section 12 includes these various requirements and also does include the criteria to apply for a special permit on that. So that applies to the rest of those through W.
Have we been shown on the plan where the hazardous materials are going to be stored?
Which hazardous materials?
The ones that you're asking for a waiver from?
I would not have put that in, but we did.
Yeah, I would say you probably have not, and I would say, they'll go in maintenance closets.
I need the location on the plan.
Well,
I mean, are we talking salt? What are we talking here? I need more clarification on this. This is a drinking water project, and we need to know those.
They'll just be normal cleaning products.
Normal?
Yes, as in household cleaning products.
Where will street materials be held?
In limited quantities in a maintenance shed.
And we need to see that on the plan. We need to know location, and we need to know amount.
The maintenance shed is on the plan.
Phil can tell you that all this is required in this zone.
We'll take a look at it, Suzanne, and make sure you get everything packaged the way you're expecting.
I mean, the fire department wants to know where these kind of products are also. You know what I mean. We need to know where they're going to be located.
The second, what Ms. Murphy said about having that be reported to the local fire department, especially when you're talking about such a large scale building, high elevations, that's extremely important.
If I may, Mr. Chair, this reminds me of a project we had a while back when the big issue was what's going to be stored, household, what could be, what is household? Some household things are not toxic, other household things are toxic. And there was a big to-do, and I can't recall what the case was, how much was going to be there, and what was going to be the transport from where the material came from. This would be specifically probably road maintenance. How is it going to come? And is it going to come? How much is going to come? So I don't think this is something we can glide over just lightly. I think this is something we really have to take a look at, because it is in a water area for the town of Walpole. And there's one thing, you want to protect your water supply no matter what.
Thank you, Jane. And as you can see, we just added the applicant is going to provide additional details, but we're going to continue to hold that.
Can I also ask another question, since we're doing hazardous? What about refueling of any trucks or anything? None of that's going to be on this property, correct?
Good question.
So we'll comply with the regulations in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay. So on X here,
yeah, I think those also pertain to the same issue we're talking about.
okay, so we'll hold that because it's in the water protection overlay district. Okay. Okay, letter Y here. If it complies with this, if it complies, why are we looking for a waiver on this?
It complies with the special permit requirements is the distinction that I think they're trying to make here.
Mr. Chairman, this goes back to what we said before. We'll be providing evidence that shows that we could, in fact, meet the criteria of a special permit where one was granted, but in fact, per what Amy had said, we're asking for a waiver for the special permit requirement because it's part of a comprehensive permit. It's the same discussion.
Okay. On site plan review, this is Z. I didn't have a hold on that. Did somebody want to hold that?
No.
Because really what we're doing is replacement of a site plan review, this whole.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, signs. I wanted to hold this one because I wasn't sure why, instead of one double-faced sign, they needed two signs, and why that's necessary. And also, then when I saw that both signs are less than 100 square feet, well, 100 square feet is about 3 sheets of plywood. That's a pretty good size sign. So, do you want to explain why you need 2 freestanding double-faced signs as opposed to 1?
So originally, and I think I think I will delete the request for 2. Originally, we wanted to have a second sign further back on the site that would be visible from people on the train. But since we changed the site plan, we don't really have an opportunity for the second one anyway. So we can eliminate.
So you'll revise that. You'll revise that request. Thank you. Okay. Landis, do we still have Ashley? Can you see if Landis is still here with us?
Excuse me, Chairman Lee.
Yes.
Are they still intending on the sign on the fence for the train? Because is actually on their drawing, and I think it's C16. It shows 2 freestanding signs and then another sign on the chain link right next to it. Is that still the intent?
I'm not sure how
C16 shows 2 proposed monumental signs, and then on the fencing, it also says proposed marketing sign to be posted on exterior fence. See architectural details. So there's 3 signs within 50 feet of each other. I'm just wondering if it's going to be like Route 1, Part 2.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you for catching that. Mr. Hale, do you plan on having signage on the fence by the train tracks?
No.
Okay.
Would it help if we just brought up a drawing of the signs? So, Patrick or Leslie, could you bring up a drawing of the sign?
1 second. I'm gonna bring Leslie in. Where did she go? Oh, okay.
Could you try
While
patching?
Ashley's doing that, can you just clarify, you said no signs on the fence, facing the train track. You mean no, marketing or identification signs, but not, I mean, I think that he would be able to put up safety signs if he had to. Is that okay with the board?
Definitely.
Okay, great.
At least me.
So those, the monument sign, which is on the right, will be on lot 2. And the marketing sign on the left will be on lot 1, both at the front of the site. At the front of the site.
And did they do anything for sight when you're pulling out? Because this is already a bad intersection.
So they're both outside the view triangle.
Okay.
So we've positioned them on the lot so that that's not an issue.
Are they going to stay up forever?
Yes.
Will they be illuminated?
Yeah.
(24/7)?
I believe that the sign bylaw requires that they go off at a certain hour. And we're not asking for a waiver from that.
Okay, so we'll condition lighting regular. Okay.
Mr. Haley, I'm looking at the plan. So one of these signs is going to go right at, they're both going to be at the entrance of the development on Summer Street. Is that the proposal?
Yes.
Okay.
So so the monument sign is shown on lot 1, just to the near building 1, and yeah, so the marketing sign is where the hand was, right there.
Okay. So those are the 2 signs that you're requesting.
Correct.
Okay. So you're going to modify the waiver request to remove the bit about the second
marketing sign, yes.
Okay, does anybody else have questions on signage? Okay.
All right, where are we?
So, Ashley, is Landis Hershey still with us, or?
Landis is no longer here.
So as I went through these, I actually was okay with them, but I wanted to know from Concom, were they, what's their input on this? And they've had ample opportunity to work on this. They've been doing the state permitting requirements. So I just wanted to make sure that, if she had anything to say about it, we'd address it tonight. But if we don't have her here, I think we're just going to have to get back from her. Does anybody, Ashley or even Amy Messier, do you know, did Landis have any comments for us on this?
I have not gotten any comments specifically on this from Landis. Given that we still need some additional information on some of the other waivers that you've identified, I can certainly share this list with her and get that feedback for you for the next meeting.
That would be helpful. That would be helpful.
Just one clarifying question as well on the 25-foot no disturb area. It's the waivers being requested for the wetland crossing areas, but it's not necessary elsewhere on the plan. And I think that was discussed previously. I just wanted to make sure that that's accurate.
Yes, and we wanted to be specific because otherwise my understanding is the project complies with that requirement. So we only want to waive it in that specific instance.
Okay, thank you.
And as you're writing that, on the proposed walkway at the rear of the property, I believe that actually is into the no disturb area. So, although I fully much support a walkway, and I think it's reasonable, I just want to make sure that if disturbance is going to take place, that we identify it now.
What walkway are you referring to, Mr. Chairman?
On the plan, there's a look. Isn't there a walkway on the back of the property? It's a gray line.
So there are some existing trails that are shown on the plan, but they're not created by the applicant.
Okay, and I see that now. It says existing unimproved footpath. So, okay, I thought that was something that was being put in there. Okay. Okay, the next thing that I think we have is the water and sewer department, water entry fees, and we've got some of those numbers there. The sewer and water department has specifically requested that we do not waive any of these because they provide water for the entire community, and part of their the way they keep a good system going is that they charge entry fees and also fees for connection fees, I guess. So I would be, at least myself, I would not want to grant this waiver because it's necessary for keeping a good water system for the town. Board members, any other thoughts?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Bob?
Agreed.
Okay. Drew?
Agreed.
Okay. And how about the same thing for your entry fee? Anybody have any reasons to approve that waiver? Okay. How about building department fees? Again, would support the quality of the town and all the entire community. I would be opposed to granting this this waiver.
I agree.
Yep, me too.
Agreed, and I think that's consistent with our prior decisions on
Yep.
application.
Okay, Drew?
Agreed.
Okay. 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 Oh, and then the global waiver, I would never want to give a global waiver for a development of any scale, particularly this scale. Anybody else have any thoughts on that? I know town council already voiced opinion on that.
I'm all set with that. I agree.
Okay. Good. Okay, next, now, we've been at this for 2 hours, over 2 hours at this point. Do people want to continue with the next set of waivers? I'm okay for, I think we've done a lot of the work, and this one there's some of the same ones, so board members?
I think we should continue, and we'll have more. Landis will have to chime in on this one too, but I think we should keep going. Myself.
Okay, everybody
I agree. We should stay the course.
Okay.
We'll pay the price tomorrow.
I think we're the same issue essentially from one to the next,
Right.
unless folks feel otherwise, it would seem like our thinking would be similar.
Okay,
Exactly.
then let's just go down. Amy Questle, do you want to go down some of these at the beginning as we did?
Sure.
Before?
We have the payment, the application fee, which you guys have already decided
Yep.
on. We have the minimum side yard setback. We're now on lot 2. We have the required front yard setback. That was a question that is not included in the rental. So that would be table 6-B.1, and it's in regard to the front yard. And the front yard setback in the limited manufacturing is 50 feet. They're requesting a waiver to allow no less than 36 feet. And I think that has to do with the house at the very beginning of the entrance when you come in. I think that's what they're considering front yard.
That's correct.
So that's for that very first house. And then we go down to the section 6-C-11, which is that kind of confusing one about the eaves and all that stuff. And then we get down to section 12, where we are looking for more information from the applicant on how they meet the requirements of a special permit. And then we can then, if we're satisfied with that, or the board's satisfied with that, you can then waive that requirement. And so that's, we go all the way down to section, to signs. And, well, I guess, I'm sorry, there was one. Section 12.3C3, that is a little bit different. That this is not included in the lot 1. And so just a note, maybe Phil, that you could also, provide the information on that one too. It seems just to be a little bit different than the others, special permits. And then we have the sign bylaw, the minimum height.
Okay, can we talk about the sign? So, it's a request that the sign be less than 8 feet from the ground. So, I think that actually makes it better, right? Mr. Hale, where is the sign? Where is the proposed location for this sign?
I just showed the proposed location of the sign.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one's out at the entryway out by Summer Street for this one also.
Correct.
Okay, and I think we felt that both those signs look good. So
Yeah.
I had been concerned about that, but at this point I'm okay with that.
And I am too.
So then we get into the conservation, the wetland waivers, which we're just going to seek some input from Landis. And then after that, we are at fees again.
Mr. Chairman, could I just try and clarify one thing in section 12? So,
Go ahead.
okay, yes, 12.3C3. I think I think that the building inspector will say that this doesn't apply because the project is on sewer, but it's unclear in the regulation.
Right. So that's what I was saying about possibly getting that information, and then we can even, if you don't need it, we don't need it. We can just take it off.
Phil can get that for us.
Okay.
Putting you to work, Phil.
Will do,
Yeah,
Suzanne.
so I was just trying to say that that's a little bit different than the special permit portion. So
Okay,
if he
I
can get us
understand.
that info, we can just delete it.
Got it. Thank you.
And then, so now you're down, Mr. Chairman, you're down to the water and sewer department, fees again. So, you probably want to just make sure that the board is.
Yep.
Their views on those.
Okay, on the last set, we're not in favor of waiving, granting that waiver. Does anybody have any feeling that we should grant the waiver on this one?
I'm a negative.
I'm a negative.
Okay, Bob, your thoughts?
Oh, same as the other fee requests. I would agree.
Okay, so those three for water entry fee, sewer fee, and building permits would all be no. And of course, the global waiver, no also on that.
Did we do the waiver of the front house being too close? Because I'm okay with that one.
Yeah, that was the 36 feet.
Did we say yes on that? I'm a yes on that one.
There was no.
Okay.
I think the question was which house. Well, I just wanted to make sure I knew which house it was.
Okay. Gotcha. I'm okay with that one.
Okay. Okay. So there's some people have some do-outs on this, and let's see, Judy Barrett, you're going to take a look at the parking issue, and Phil Mackey, you have a number of things that you're going to look at, and I think at the next meeting, hopefully we're going to have word from Landis on these specific waivers from a conservation point of view, which, as I already said, I think we're okay with, but I do want to hear it directly from them.
And Shirley, we'll have this waivers list posted to the town website, so folks who want to see it, it's available.
Okay. Good.
Mr. Chair, would we be able to find out from the applicant where they are at the Conservation Commission? What in the process? Where in the process they are?
Sure. Mr. Hale, where are you at with Concom at this point?
So I think we probably will have at least one more hearing, maybe 2 or 3. But I think that we've exceeded the requirements of the Wetlands Protection Act.
So when's your next meeting is actually all I really needed to know.
The 24th, Wednesday.
Oh, okay. This week. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, we've gone through all the waivers, and what I'd like to do is continue until a time when we can get the answers for those few remaining questions that are out there. And I appreciate everybody's work on this tonight. Ashley, any recommendations what we should be looking at?
So I would ask, I don't know how long it's going to take this additional information, so I don't know how much time they need.
Mr. Hale, how much time do you think you need to get the information? And I know most of it's going to be on Attorney Mackey.
So I think you'll have it by tomorrow morning.
Pressure, Phil. I think wasn't there a report about the the water, the impact, that special permit that we were talking about?
It's a certification which probably will come from Katie's office. And it's not a separate report. It's really just an amalgamation of everything else we've done.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that that's part of what's included, and I didn't know if that could be done by tomorrow morning.
So
I figure we can have it in a half hour and start again, right?
Well, Katie's smiling, so she must agree.
So, Phil, wouldn't that typically be handled as a condition?
I think.
No, it would actually be handled as part of the submission, which is what we're showing the board.
Okay.
Ashley, anything else?
So depending on how long that, I would suggest that you continue out to a date based on how long it will take the longest piece of information required. So I didn't hear how long that certificate from Katie's office was definitely going to take or not.
No, that can be done tomorrow, Ashley.
Okay.
Thanks.
So we have a hearing on Wednesday, the 24th. Right now, let's say the 2nd. So I don't know if you want to add this on to Wednesday's discussion.
You don't have enough time. You don't have 48 hours.
Right.
And we have conservation Wednesday.
Okay. So then that leaves Thursday or March 1st, which is a Monday. So a week.
I'd rather go March 1st, make sure everybody has time to get the information that they need. That's 1 week out, and reconvene this and really get through with the waivers March 1st, Monday.
So,
Amy Questle, does that work for you?
Yes.
so,
Mr. Hale, go ahead.
well, I'd like to request that at least a draft decision be circulated before Monday. We've been at this a year.
Yeah, and we still found that we were still needing information tonight at tonight's hearing. So, Amy, how are you doing on the draft decision?
The draft, as I said at the last meeting, the draft it's drafted. I have to put in all of the special conditions that we got in Sean's letter and the fire department tonight. I've got notes on some conditions, so I'll do my best.
So could we have a work session? I mean, I think that in general, we're in general agreement with a lot of what was in Sean's letter. There's clearly some wordsmithing that I think would be helpful in terms of the conditions, and I would suggest that Sean, Amy, Ashley, and myself discuss those and try and get to conditions that seem workable.
Amy, what's your thought on that?
That's fine. Mr. Hale could also just submit, Sean's conditions with the wording that he would like to see.
I can do that.
If you want to just do a red line or something, and then if I had any questions, I could send them over, as I did with the waivers.
Okay. So I'll leave it to you, Amy, when you feel comfortable with the draft to distribute that out to people.
Yep, I will.
And okay. Does anybody have anything else?
Mr. Chair, I may not be available on March 1st.
Okay.
But if I'm not, I can get a memo to you or to Ashley in advance.
And that would be about the parking question, about the affordable units and all. Yeah, that would be helpful.
And I may need to talk to Amy about this before I finish that memo, but I will have something for you by Monday night.
Yeah, and really what we're looking for is a condition that somebody else has used that addresses this concern about affordability and parking. So, okay.
And I'll also get my draft over to Judy. Judy's seen many of my decisions, so she would only have to be looking at the site specific conditions, but I'll get them over to her too. So if she had any comments on those, she could let me know.
Great.
Okay. And board members, if you have any other conditions, would you send them to Amy Messier, who then will consolidate them? I don't want Amy Questle to be inundated with other conditions from board members, but if you have some other ones that we've discussed that you want included, we can funnel them through Amy Messier. That would be helpful. Okay. Anything else, folks? Good. Could I have, we will continue this until next Monday, which is March 1st.
Oh,
And at what, can we do 7 o'clock or do we have to do 7:30?
We can do 7 o'clock. 7:30 was because I had a 6:30 tonight, but I'm fine for 7 o'clock.
Okay. Could I have a motion to continue this until March 1st at 7 o'clock by Zoom?
so moved, but, are we okay extension-wise?
No, I'm gonna ask, the next thing I'm gonna ask is the applicant to give us an extension until, Wednesday, the 3rd. Or maybe I should do that first.
Yeah.
Suzanne. Mr. Hale, will you give us an extension until Wednesday, the 3rd of March?
I've given you an extension to the 2nd. What's one day, right?
What's one day? We've been at this for a while. Okay.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Levine.
can I just verify when the applicant may see a draft decision?
When our town council has the draft decision ready to go.
Well, will it be between now and the 1st?
Yeah, I said I would get
Just-
something over
She just said Monday.
by Monday. Yep.
Monday is the 1st.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Okay. So we have a extension granted until Wednesday the 3rd, and Suzanne, you made the motion to continue until Monday the 1st at 7 p.m. Could I have a second on that?
Second.
Second by Jane Coffey. Any further discussion? Okay. All those in favor, roll call vote. Suzanne Murphy,
Murphy, aye.
Bob Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Jane Coffey.
Aye.
Drew Delaney.
Aye.
An aye for me. Okay, thank you, everybody. We do have one set of minutes to, thank you, Sean, thank you, Judy, thank you, Katie, Leslie, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night, everybody. For board members, we still have one set of minutes that we just got today from the February 10th. Bob, did you have a chance to review those? Okay. Okay, I did. We won't vote on it, but Amy, one thing in that Mr. Hamilton referred to illegal dumping. Would you take out the word illegal? Because I don't know what kind of dumping, if any, took place there, but I don't want it on their minutes that there was illegal dumping on the site. And that is, well, everybody else can take a look at those minutes, and then we'll vote on those next time. Okay, Ashley, do you have anything for us?
I don't. Thank you all.
Okay.
I think we got a lot of material.
Okay, Patrick, welcome to the fun of the Walpole Zoning Board. I look forward to working.
For having me. It was a very good learning experience to see what you guys have been working on for the past year with this project. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil Mackey, do you have anything for us? I see you're still there. Okay, maybe Phil's.
He's spying on us.
Oh no! If he was a student, that's when I usually post a question to him. But okay, we'll all be getting together on Wednesday night, and we're gonna have KW Steel, and I think Amy, what
Don't we do Moose Hill? Aren't we doing Moose Hill too?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we have another busy night in front of us. Okay, thank you, everybody. It's 10 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in
Second.
favor of adjourning, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Abstained, so carried. Okay, thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Patrick. See you, Phil. Board members.
Thank you.